Welcome back to Split Decision Episode 9. Today we're going to recap UFC Vegas 78, take a look ahead to UFC 292, give you our top 5 Boston people, places, or things, and much more. So let's go.
Alright, so right before we jump into the recap of UFC Vegas 78, this one's going to go a little bit different. Christian ran off to Florida, so I'll be doing this section solo. We pre-recorded, what we could. This part we couldn't. So moving on from there, UFC Vegas 78 featured 13 fights. We had quite a few first-round knockouts, just a couple submissions, sorry. From there, it was a great card leading up to UFC 292. So let's jump right in. So look, the main event featured Vicente Luque versus Rafael Dos Anjos in a welterweight clash that really just made it to the judges to decide a victor. Luque showed his striking ability. He showed it early, and he followed it up with a bunch of, in my opinion, surprise takedowns. He went 8 out of 11 secured. It's a personal best for him. 8 out of 11. A lot of takedowns in a fight, regardless. No argument with the judges here. They thought he dominated the fight just like I did. Unanimous decision for Vicente Luque. Honestly, he's just happy to be able to fight again. He suffered a brain bleed in his last fight. It was a knockout loss. He suffered a brain bleed. He didn't know if he'd be able to come back. So what's next for him? Honestly, I think he might face somebody like a Michael Chiesa type. In that weight class, in the welterweight class, he could wholeheartly, face that gatekeeper in the 15 spot. Let us know what you think. We want to hear from you. Let's hear questions, your comments. You can email us at splitdecision2023@gmail.com, or you can text us at 337-414-2202. Now moving on to the co-main event, the featherweight division. Typically impressive, showed us another great match. Cub Swanson versus Hakeem Dawodu. This one had some controversy in my opinion. I personally thought Hakeem Dawodu won the fight, but the judges gave Swanson the unanimous decision actually. Maybe it was a takedown in the 3rd round that really secured it for Cub. I will say it was a close fight. After rewatching it, I don't feel quite so slighted. I went on social media pretty heavily and just kind of just went in. But, I think it was a very close decision. I still think they got it wrong. But whether that was a bad decision or not, it was still a great fight. Both held aggressive striking and stayed in the pocket to create combos. They threw their jab, took a shot just to throw that second or third punch or third strike, body kick, body punch, doesn't matter. They stayed in the pocket to try to end the fight, to try to further their advantage in the fight. So, great one to them. So, UFC Vegas 78 had 6 knockouts. This was the only one on the main card. We had Chris Dukehouse versus Khalil Roundtree. This was pretty much guaranteed to be an explosive fight in the light heavyweight division. We didn't see it going any other way. Honestly, this fight started off very, very quickly. The two, got really close, started getting into the clinch, throwing knees, grinding against the fence. Very close contested. It was honestly the smartest thing Chris Dukehouse could have done to, take the damage off a lot of those shots. Where it really messed up, though, after splitting apart, Roundtree threw just a rocket left hand. He split the guard. Dukehouse dropped to the canvas. And then, of course, Khalil just pounced. He jumped on top, started raining fists until the fight was stopped for the only first round, the only KO of the main card. Next up, we have the women's strawweight division. Polyana Viana versus Yasmin Lucindo. Lucindo came out strong, landing shots, rocking Viana early. She got the takedown, And then they got back to their feet. Viana, she contested, towards the end of the first round. That the rocking really threw her off, but she was able to compose herself a little bit. It looked like she started to, get a rhythm, get a feel for it. And then going, right back to the ground in the second round. Lucindo got the triangle arm choke, submitting her, almost just under 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 42 seconds into the second round. This was one of only 2 submissions. Most of the main card went either to the decision or deep into the fight. The only early stoppage, or the only two non-decisions. This fight was a submission, and the one I just spoke about, Chris Dukaus, was the first round knockout. The rest of the fights on the main card were for different reasons decisions. A couple fights on this card had a couple weight problems. 2 fights in a row. First one I'll talk about is going to be AJ Dobson. He made weight versus Tafon Nchukwi. He missed weight by about 3.5 pounds. In my opinion, that's completely unacceptable. A lot of fighters feel this way. They feel like it's completely cheating, which I wholeheartedly agree. You only have to give up 30% of your money, but you can still, increase in the rankings. You can still go up. Yes, of course, it's on the other fighter to not fight, but a lot of these guys, they have to fight. These unranked opponents, they have to fight. They don't have contracts that are longer than 1-2 fights a lot of the times. So they need to be able to go out there and perform, even if they're having with odds stacked against them. Nchukwi missed weight by 3.5 pounds. At least in this case, AJ Dobson was able to, overcome that adversity. Was able to win this fight by unanimous decision. Picking Nchukwi apart, moving his head in very fluid motions, not really ever giving Nchukwi an opportunity to, land a lot of damage. So props to AJ Dobson for really showing us how it's done, making weight, beating somebody who didn't, overcoming the odds. Great to you, AJ Dobson. The first fight of the main card was Josh Fremd versus Jamie Pickett. This was probably, in my opinion, the worst fight of the entire night. Josh Fremd came in 3 pounds over, but he also came in without power or lungs. He did do enough to win by unanimous decision, but it was far from a pretty performance. 40 seconds into the first round, he seemed completely gassed, out of it, not kind of hanging on his opponent, hanging on Pickett the rest of the fight. And not to say that, the 3 pounds is what did it to him, but there was obviously some issues going in. I know I spoke about in the last fight how, there needs to be a harsher penalty. I'm not going to go again, into my deep dive on that, but y'all know how I feel. Either way, Josh Fremd won by a pretty poor unanimous performance decision. Jamie Pickett also just didn't do enough here. I don't know, what his deal was going in, but he's been a killer in the past as well. So let's hope both these guys write their trains and get back out there in order to make some entertaining fights in the future. So normally we don't cover the UFC Vegas cards, anything but the main card. I took an exception here for a couple reasons. Number one, I'm by myself, so I need to make a little bit more content to make up for the lack of otherwise communication. And number two, 2 fighters just did some pretty impressive things. Terrence McKinney fought for the 3rd time in 2023. He's been fighting like crazy. It was another first-round KO for him, minute and 25 seconds into the fight. Obviously, we're going to see McKinney fighting again soon. He jokingly asked for a fight this coming week, but then he found out that it was, this coming week in Boston. So he was like, no, give me a month off. But he had the advantage very early. It wasn't the ideal start to 2020 for him, but we're big fans. He's definitely looking to turn his 2023 around. And, his 4th or 5th fight, should solidify that for him. And lastly, the other fight on the prelim, the reason we're talking about this one is it's a history moment in the UFC. Damon Blackshear defeated Jose Johnson with only the third twister in UFC history. That was inside of the first round. So for him to be able to get that kind of move inside of the first round shows really how dominant he was being, and shows how much control he was getting on the ground throughout the limited showing we saw in this fight. All right, so next we are going to cover, or I guess I should say I am going to cover, the bets and picks from this past week and the season. So to run through it, Christian, for his bets, he went 2-1, got 2 right, 1 wrong. His first bet, he picked AJ Dobson money line, got that correct. His second bet was Khalil Roundtree, good job him. His third bet was RDA, Rafael Dos Anjos money line. He lost that one. Good for him. He moved to a 16-8 total record for a 67% percent accuracy, I guess I should say. Not win streak. That would be dumb. And myself, this was the worst week I've had of the season. I went 1-2. My first bet was Tafon Chukui. Of course, I picked him before I knew he missed weight. Otherwise, I might have gone the other way. Second bet was Yasmin Lucinda versus Polyana Viana, the over. Got that one wrong as well. And the only bet I did get right was I picked Vicente Luque money line. So at least he was the slight underdog there. So I lost a little bit less this week. Bringing me to 13-10-1 on the season for 56% accuracy on those picks. I promise I will get those up. And for picks on the week, Christian picked Josh Frim, Yasmin Lucinda, Khalil Roundtree, Hakeem Dawodu, and Rafael Dos Anjos, going 4-2. I did slightly worse at 3-3. Frim, Viana, Roundtree, Dawodu, Chukui. Oh, and Christian picked Dobson. And then I got Luque. So 3-3 from me there. Pretty good. Moves Christian to a solid 32-22, 59%. You see how we kind of mirrored each other on the percentages there, on the picks and bets? I probably should just start betting on everything, I guess. And for me, 37-17 on picks, 68% correct. Next week, we're going to be trying to beat AI in picks. So get ready, UFC 292. We're going to be taking on ChatGPT in picks. We've already got theirs locked in. Brad Tavares, Cheeto Vera, Cody Garbrandt, which has now been canceled, Denis Tululin, Ian Gary, Weili Zhang, Aljamain Sterling. Look out. We'll be talking about our picks a little bit later in the episode, but we'll be going against ChatGPT this week.
All right, so let's move ahead to our preview of UFC 292 in Boston this weekend. The first fight we're going to cover is actually the Ultimate Fighter Season 31 lightweight finale. It's going to be Austin Thud Hubbard versus Kurt Holobaugh. Both of these guys are former UFC fighters. They both of these fighters spent 2 fights out of the UFC after getting dropped. Hubbard comes in 3-4 overall in the UFC, 15-6 as his overall record. Holobaugh, 19-7 overall. He is 0-3 in the UFC, though. How do you think this one goes, Alex?
Dude, honestly, Holobaugh's last stint in the UFC had him 0-3. He didn't win a single fight. But then he goes back to his regional circuit, the XFC, and he's just knocking people out. Where Hubbard's last stint in the UFC, he's 3-4. This is kind of a confusing matchup. You know, they're both kind of getting their second chance here. Being the Ultimate Fighter finale.
Yeah, the Ultimate Fighter this year was rookies versus vets that have been cut. So both of these guys, the vets
kind of shined here.
Yeah. That was Michael Chandler's team. That's why he dominated so much.
Winner getting a UFC contract. Honestly, I think Austin Hubbard has what it takes to beat Kurt Holobaugh here. I don't know how far he's going to go in the lightweight division, as we are always talking that division's complete killers. But I think Austin Hubbard has what it takes to win this specific fight to earn himself a UFC contract.
Yeah, I think Hubbard has proven he can win some fights in the UFC. I think he's a legit UFC fighter. Holloway, he struggled in the UFC, and I think that difference between the two skill sets is going to show. I got Austin Hubbard.
Moving on to the next middleweight fight of the night, we have Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez.
That's a cool ass nickname. I'm just gonna say that.
It really is. I wish my real name was RoboCop. But anyway, Gregory Rodriguez versus Denis Tiuliulin.
Russian versus Brazilian.
We have a big difference of styles here. You have Tiuliulin, who's a precision kickboxer. Rodriguez, he's skilled in striking, grappling. Obviously, jiu-jitsu. You know, he can take you down. He can submit you. Rodriguez has 8 KOs, 3 submissions, 2 decision victories.
Yeah, and his last 3 wins have been KO, TKO, so.
And then Tiuliulin has 9 out of 10 TKOs as his record, 10 wins, 10 wins, 7 losses. Only losing once by KO, 4 times by submission. Kind of a clash of matchup here with that. You know, it's showing that he's a little weak to submission, but also showing that Rodriguez can be knocked out. What do you think happens here?
So Rodriguez comes in. He's 4-2 in the UFC, so he's been in the UFC a little bit longer than Tiuliulin. Tiuliulin 1-2. I think this is going to be a case where they come out, they fight. Rodriguez, huge favorite, by the way, minus 350. I think he comes in, hits him with the hands. He can either take him out by the hands or by choking him out. I have Rodriguez winning, and I think it's going to be a finish. I think it's going to be under 2.5 rounds.
That's actually my first bet of the night.
That is also
Rodriguez
my first bet.
Tiuliulin under on the card.
I have that as well.
I agree with you. I think either way, even though we both picked Rodriguez here, I think either way this fight finishes under 10 minutes total.
Okay, so let's move on to the last prelim fight we're going to cover. It's Chris, the All-American Weidman, coming back from that vicious leg break against Uriah Hall. It's been 2+ years since he's fought. He's taken on Brad Tavares. Weidman comes in. He's 15-6 overall, like I said. All 6 of his losses are by KO, so he doesn't lose any other way. He is the former middleweight champ, but he has lost 6 out of his last 8. So he's been on a little bit of a slide. But I will say, before the leg break, which did count as a loss, which kind of sucks, he won the fight before that. So it looked like he had kind of maybe figured some things out again. He's taking on Brad Tavares, who comes in 2 straight losses. So it's 2 guys trying to kind of get a grip back on their career. How do you think this fight goes?
Honestly, man, here, I follow Weidman on social media. He's already stated that he's going to throw this leg kick right into the opening round as hard as he possibly can.
And I love that. I love that mentality because that's what you got to do.
Yeah, if you're going to overcome your own personal fear, you're going to throw it as hard as you can. You're going to come out with that pressure that shows that you mean business and that you're not just going to fold at the beginning of the fight.
Yeah, and it's probably honestly a real mental thing for him just to be like, okay, I don't have to worry about this.
Right,
we've throw this leg kick.
We've talked before about people coming back from a truly like KO, sleeping knockout, being submitted, unconscious. That's hard to come back from because it really messes with your mental state.
That's hard to come back from. I think this is 10 times harder to come back.
Right, this is physical and mental rehab, both, to the point where for a while he was wheelchair bound.
This is like a running back with a bad ACL tear, where it's like
Adrian Peterson coming back and trying to play again.
The best thing to do is go out there and do hard cuts just to have confidence in your knee. That way you're just not worrying about it.
Right. The first snap you take, you do the heaviest juke you can possibly do and just see what holds up.
So how do you think this fight goes? Weidman is a big underdog. He's plus 220. Brad Tavares minus 270. I actually have Chris Weidman winning this fight. I think he's going to be motivated enough, and he's facing a guy that's also probably not in the prime of his career. I have Chris Weidman winning, and I'm going to put my second bet, Chris Weidman money line. I like the value at plus 220.
I'm doing the exact same. I think Chris Weidman wins here. I also have him as my second bet money line. But one of the things I was focusing on, one of the things I paid attention to more than really anything else when I was researching the two, is that while Brad Tavares is 19-8, he's won 12 of his fights by decision, which, you know, I haven't seen every fight he's fought, granted, but it leads to me that when you're only losing fights by KO like Chris Weidman, you have what it takes to beat somebody like Brad Tavares, who's winning most of his fights by decision.
Yeah, Chris Weidman, that's proven to be the only way to beat him, is KO.
Right. All right. So to kick off our first fight of the pay-per-view, we have Marlon, better known as Cheeto Vera, in the bantamweight division at 135 pounds, fighting Pedro, the young Punisher, Munoz. Both fighters coming in here never being finished. Cheeto is 20-8, 8 KOs, 8 submissions, 4 decisions. I guess 20-8-1 because he has the draw. Only losing his 8 losses by decision. And Munoz being 5 KOs, 8 submissions, 7 decisions, 2 no contest, losing his 7 fights by decision. What do you think happens here, Christian?
Yeah, so both these guys, very similar records, as you said, 2-8-1 for Marlon Cheeto Vera, 27-2 for Pedro Munoz. Neither been finished. Marlon Cheeto Vera comes in 14-7 in the UFC. He has won 4 out of his last 5. His only loss was a technical loss to Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen was a very technical, smart fighter, so it's not a bad loss.
And we saw that a couple weeks ago, actually, with Sandhagen being...
He's such a cerebral fighter where he
picks some people apart, man. It's just nasty.
You just know he game plans so well, and he finds your weakness, and he's trying to exploit that. That's kind of what he did to Cheeto.
And it's like in the NFL when they watch tape. You know, it's like you learn so much about the person, you can like replicate their moves. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. Both of these guys pretty well-rounded. Munoz kind of leans more to the subs. I have Marlon Cheeto Vera winning the fight. I also have this fight, considering the fact that neither guy has ever been finished, I think Cheeto wins it by decision. So my third and last bet of the night is going to be over 2.5 rounds. I think this goes to the decision, goes to the scorecard. Both these guys are tough. How do you think this fight goes?
Honestly, I think Cheeto Vera wins it. I don't see him being upset here. He is a slight favorite on the betting odds. But overall, you know, he has a couple more KO finishes. He's got the same amount of submissions. He's got fewer decision wins, which, you know, to me kind of points that he's going to be a little bit more aggressive. Honestly, I think he's going to win here. I don't have any problem with your bet. You know, statistically, this fight's going to the decision anyway. So I don't see an upset happening here.
And who doesn't love Marlon Cheeto Vera? One of the most favorite fighters in the UFC. Cool guy. All right, so the next fight we're going to look at is Cody No Love Garbrandt taking on Mario Batista. Cody comes in 2-5 in his last 7 fights. That's since he won the title. So he's obviously, most people that follow MMA know he's kind of been on the downturn. He hasn't been himself in a while. He did win his last fight, so maybe he's turning the corner. He's taking on Mario Batista, who is 6-2 overall in the UFC. He has 4 straight wins, 3 straight wins by round 1 finish. So what it looks like to me is there's one guy that's ascending his career, ascending to the top of the division, versus another guy who's, I don't want to say descending. He is descending, though, and he's kind of become a gatekeeper. You want to beat him to get a name on your resume.
Absolutely. He's a, in my mind, future Hall of Famer with his accolades. Cody Garbrandt comes in with a mixed record recently, you know, only winning 2 out of his last 5.
2 out of his last 7.
2 out of his last 7. I was trying
also
to get...
2 out of his last 5. You're correct.
Hey man, let me give him credit. 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5 for the Cody Garbrandt.
Former champ, we will say that.
Right.
He did dominate Dominic Cruz to get the belt.
Batista, you know, he's won 4 out of 5, like you said, 3 of those being submission first round stoppages. Honestly, this is another fight where it's a difference of styles. It's a clash of styles. It's 2 careers that could potentially be going in 2 different directions. You know, it's an all-time story card for the UFC where they're making the clash matchups for the pay-per-view, and they're making everything just kind of keep you on your toes. In this fight, I think Mario Batista is going to win. He's kind of heavy favorite on the card, minus 320 to Cody Garbrandt's plus 250. Honestly, I think he has what it takes to win here. I don't know if it's going to be decision, knockout, submission. I think it's going to be a tough fight for both guys, but I think Batista gets the victory at the end of the day.
I agree with you that Batista probably wins, but Cody Garbrandt still does have that power at his weight class where he could potentially be one punch away from winning the fight. But I agree with you. I think Batista wins the fight. I think it's probably by submission, but I'm not confident enough to put a bet. But my pick for the fight is Mario Batista to win.
Walking into our next welterweight matchup, we have a late replacement, Neil the Haitian Sensation Magny versus Ian the Future Gary. Both of these fighters are well experienced in the UFC. Obviously, Neil Magny's quite a bit more experienced, being 28-10, being 7 KO victories, 4 submissions, 17 decisions. Kind of a glaringly obvious decision victory champ over here. He's going to be fighting Gary. I think Gary will be the favorite on the card. As of now, they hadn't released the odds yet. We're filming this a couple weeks, or not a couple weeks, I'm sorry, a couple days early because, Christian, you're going to be going on vacation. Correct. So congratulations to you, you bastard.
Thank you.
But outside of that, we think Gary's going to be the favorite and the fan favorite. You know, everybody likes Gary. Both guys being very...
I wouldn't say everybody likes him, but
everybody I care about likes him.
Everybody has an opinion, which is pretty much all you need to be a popular fighter.
Fair enough. What do you think is going to happen in this fight?
So, Neil Magny, I will say this. He's the first fighter since we started the podcast that we're covering his second fight. He fought back in June, so I will commend him for that.
Episode 1, I believe that one was called Fresh Take.
I believe
split
so.
decision.
He fought in June, like I said, at UFC Jacksonville. The main event was Topuria Emmett. So props to him for that. This is a step up in competition for Gary. He's slowly gotten better and better opponents. I do think Ian Gary is about it, though. I think he's going to come in. I think he's going to move to 6-0. He may not get the finish, but I think he comes in and gets the win. I have Ian Gary winning the fight, probably by decision, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a way to knock Neil Magny out. TKO, at least.
Look, I like what you said here. I think one of the things where Gary needs to prove he can handle is with his submission defense, right? Magny's going to come in. I think he's going to shoot for the takedown when he sees the opportunity, and I think that's going to be where Gary has the opportunity to either to shine or fail. But in result, I think Gary's actually going to win the fight. I think he's going to shine in those moments. I think at 25, being the younger fighter here, he's kind of on the right trajectory to be at least in contention for a title in the future.
Oh, I think he obviously does, but I think the UFC and the way they're trying to market him and build him up, everybody looks at this guy as a future possible champ, definitely series contender.
Right. I have Ian Gary as my next pick for the fight.
All right, so let's move on to the co-main event of the evening. For the 115 women's title, it's Zhang Weili taking on Amanda Lemos. Zhang Weili comes in 23-3 overall. She's 7-2 in the UFC. Her only 2 losses are to Rose Namajunas. One was by a KO. One was by a controversial split decision. She's probably one of my favorite fighters to watch, so I'm very excited to watch her. She takes on Amanda Lemos, who also comes in 7-2, comes in on a 2-fight winning streak, and is a girl that wins a lot of fights by finishes. How do you think this fight goes, Alex?
So starting off, Zhang is defending her title. You know, she beat Carla Espinoza to...
I think Zhang is her last name. Weili would be her first name.
Right. I'm just trying to say one of them correct, to be honest with you.
Hey, I understand, brother.
So I'm saying Zhang because I know how to say Zhang. So Zhang is defending her title. She won the title after beating Carla Esparza.
She beat Carlos Esparza after Carlos Esparza took the belt in the most boring fight ever against Rose.
Right. When
probably the
Zhang originally lost the title to Rose, Rose had a non-impressive, title defense.
I mean, it was literally one of the most boring fights ever against Esparza.
I remember watching it with you. It was
Nobody
pretty crazy.
threw anything. But Zhang Weili, she has to be one of the most talented female fighters on the roster.
Especially in the strawweight division at 115 pounds. She is consistently, put pressure on people. She's shown people that she can knock you out. She can beat you by submission, but also she can take you to the cards and win. I think here, especially being the betting favorite, Weili Zhang defends the belt. I think she keeps the belt, and I think she starts on the first of many defenses.
I agree with you, and I hope she does because I like her so much. I also have her winning the fight. I think, as you said, this is just one of the first, not the first, but one of many more to come of her holding on to this title. I have Zhang Weili as my pick.
To follow up our main card, the main event of UFC 292, we have Aljamain, the Funkmaster Sterling, versus Sugar Sean O'Malley, and what is honestly more than a betting matchup. This is a fan matchup. There's a lot of people who are fans of Aljo. There's a lot of people who are fans of O'Malley.
Two polarizing guys.
One's not very good on Twitter. The other is Sean O'Malley.
Yeah, you go from the smooth guy who comes up with funny shit to the corny guy who you can't tell if he's purposely being corny.
Or if it's kind of like me and you think you're funny and you're not.
Agreed, but which might also be just as funny as being the smooth, funny guy.
It depends on what take you're fighting. I mean, if I can't fight, I'm just not funny. If he can fight and he's ironic, he might be funny. We don't know.
The thing I'll say is we're laughing with Sean O'Malley when he's funny. We're laughing at Aljo when he's funny.
Personally, yes. So listen, Aljo won the belt controversially against Peter Yan. He took an illegal knee to the head while his hands were down.
He did come back and then dominate Peter Yan.
Correct. He has since defended that belt with poise, I have to say. Being a fan or not, I got to give credit where it's due. And listen, I wholeheartedly agree that Sean O'Malley is facing his toughest competition yet in the UFC. But I personally think he has what it takes to get it done. I think it will be a tough matchup, but I think Sean O'Malley is going to find his rhythm. And within 5 rounds, he's gonna show either, a knockout submission, or he's gonna show the judges that it was a clear-cut victory. What do you think is gonna happen?
I'll tell you one thing: he's not getting a submission over Aljo.
You never know.
Aljo comes in. These are 2 of the most impressive records in a matchup I've seen in a while. Aljo comes in 23-3, 9 straight wins. Sean O'Malley 16-1-1, 8-1-1 in the UFC. So these are 2 guys, they don't lose very often. They usually win fights, and they usually win fights pretty convincingly. This is the typical MMA matchup that everybody wants. Stylistically, they're very different. You have the guy that on the ground, almost unbeatable. He can wrestle, he can submit you, and that's an Aljo. Then you have Sean O'Malley, who comes in, probably one of the most beautiful and technical strikers in the UFC, regardless of weight class.
Man, that left shot, huh?
He has a crazy left hook, crazy left hand. He's a KO artist, so this is a difference of style. Sean O'Malley, one of my favorite UFC fighters. He's one of my favorite UFC personalities, but
before you say let me add in, this is also my 3rd bet of the night. Sean O'Malley money line. And I feel like you're about to crush me with your pick here, and we're going to be rooting against each other all night. But I say my pick and my 3rd bet of the night is Sean O'Malley money line.
So you got your butt in. Here's my butt in. But Aljamain Sterling is one of the most dominant ground guys in the UFC, especially for his weight class. I think it's going to be a good fight. I think he's going to withstand some of the Sean O'Malley pressure on the feet. Sean O'Malley's probably going to be better than him on the feet. But eventually, Aljo's going to get him down. Eventually, Aljo's going to get his back. Eventually, Aljo's going to become the backpack that he always is. And I think Aljo gets the submission.
Dora the Explorer.
Exactly. I think Aljo comes in, gets his back, gets a submission. I think it's probably in like the second or third round. I'm not confident enough to put a bet on. I am confident in it, but I already have my 3 bets. Aljo winning this fight, probably by submission.
Listen, brother, I hope you're wrong.
Honestly, I hope I'm wrong too, because I like Sean O'Malley more, but I'm just saying what I see.
Fair enough.
All right, so let's move on to our top 5 of the week. As usual, we're going to stick with the theme. UFC 292 is in Boston. Boston is one of the most historic cities in America. Has some of the most famous people from America are from Boston. Has some crazy architecture, crazy history. So our top 5 this week is going to be Boston things. So that could be a Boston person,
A Boston place.
a Boston thing. So pretty much a Boston noun.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
You get what you can see the cards I'm laying down.
I got my 5.
You got your 5.
I
All
got
right.
6 if you want me to be honest.
Yeah, I got a few too. So how about you start off your number 5 favorite Boston thing?
All right. Before one split second before I do my number 5, I want to give you my honorable mention. I know we don't talk about honorable mentions too much, but it recently came to my attention that the Chris Evans is from Boston. Captain America.
I did see that in my extensive research.
So I want to just throw him up for an honorable mention. You know, I was a teenager when most of the Captain America Marvel movies that he was in came out. So heavy props to him. But my number 5 for Boston things, Boston nouns, Boston people, place, or things is going to be Boston, the band. Hit singer or hit band
More
of
than a feeling.
More Than a Feeling. Yeah.
I know Boston. I like that pick. That's a great pick. One of the best, at this point, classic rock bands of all time.
Right. Yeah, I've known about them since I
Probably
guess
one
my
of the-
mom told me about them.
That's definitely a parent band. You find out from your parents. Probably one of the most karaoke bands of all time.
Yeah, it's
They're up
definitely
there.
they have a bunch of catchy songs. They're not negative. They have very positive lyrics. It's a very karaoke friendly band. Number 5, Boston the band. What you got as your number 5, Christian?
So my number 5, I think it's something that's gonna be close to both of our hearts. This is a company.
Skin?
Close.
Oh.
This is a company that we both love. They put out, I know we're a content podcast. They put out probably the content I consume the most. They were founded in and around Boston, Barstool Sports. My favorite podcasts are on Barstool, my favorite personalities, most of the stuff I watch on YouTube. I love Barstool Sports. That's probably my inspiration of why I wanted to do a podcast with you.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't even understand how that's your number 5. Should be your number 1 if that's the inspiration for the podcast. But I will say El Prez has been an inspiration to a lot of people. He did, in fact, to your point, he did cause me to, kind of take the jump, hit the purchase button on the equipment from Amazon and such. I really like that pick. Barstool Sports is near and dear to my heart. I love the Yak, Sports Advisors, PMT, One Bite. There's a bunch of good shows in their network. And, I wholeheartedly agree. Barstool Sports is a great answer.
What you got for number 4?
My number 4 is, he's an old guy. It's one of my he's actually my only person on my top 5. He was known to have invented the bifocal. He flew a kite with a key on it, got electrocuted. We're talking the man on the $100 bill, the one, the only, Mr. Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, one of the founding fathers, One of the smartest guys.
One of
probably in
the
American
most
history.
influential founding fathers to never be a president.
He's also one of the most influential people to have syphilis.
Well, don't knock him for that.
I'm not knocking him. I'm just saying it.
He was having fun.
He also had a long residency in Paris where he would cheat on his wife. But I do like Ben Franklin.
Right. I mean,
I know I sound negative. I feel like I'm too negative on one of the founding fathers.
yeah, I mean, it's Ben Franklin. He never had any wrongdoings in his life. It's Ben Franklin.
I don't know. Go read his diary. He admits to it.
Yeah, there was that thing where they found like 100, 200 bodies in his basement where he was running like an illegal med school in his basement.
Yeah,
in New
but
York.
they did say he was known to
Do weird
fuck around
shit
with
like
skeletons.
that.
He wasn't killing people.
No, he wasn't killing people, but he was definitely experimenting on skeletons.
So my number 4, I'm going to move on so we don't...
Harp too long on it.
Yeah, I don't want to get canceled for shitting on Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
My number 4, this is
Eyeglasses.
a Boston staple. It is one of the things Boston's most known for, especially in the past 10 years because of a unfortunate terrorist attack. As a fellow runner myself, I run a lot. The Boston Marathon is like the pinnacle of foot races. It's if you think of a marathon, the Boston Marathon's number 1, most prestigious. So my number 4 is the Boston Marathon. It's something that the whole city, and this isn't a city of runners or anything, the whole city, this is like a holiday for them.
Right. For Boston, it's almost like St. Patty's Day, right? It's an event that brings everybody out. It's a community event.
Especially since the terrorist attack. It even amplified
Right.
it more.
I would say it's even more popular due to the community involvement saying, listen, a terrorist attack isn't going to back us down.
We're going to back us down. In fact,
we're going to be stronger in
this.
spite of what you're trying to hurt us with.
Exactly.
I think that's one of the things that shows you with American resiliency, especially in the Boston community. That's a great pick, the Boston Marathon.
I agree, and that's where that hashtag Boston Strong, that's where it came from.
Right.
What do you have as your number 3?
So my number 3, up until recently, has been one of the things that has disgusted me most just by a rivalry. I have since jumped the bandwagon on the New York Yankees. Now I'm following the Atlanta Braves. So I'm happy to say,
team from me. I'm a Braves fan.
I'm happy to say, yeah, you longtime Braves. I'm new Braves. I'm bandwagon Braves at this point, but I'll earn my keep. I promise you.
We'll accept you. We'll accept you.
So, because I'm allowed to say it now, my number 3 best thing of Boston, best thing in Boston, things, people, place, things, whatever. The big green monster, the 37-foot wall in left field, causing people not to get home runs since 1934.
So it causes people not to get home runs, but it is very short, so it could give you a home run as well. But I'm not going to talk too much on your number 3, only because my number 3 is the whole ballpark. It's Fenway Park, and the biggest attribute of Fenway Park, it does have the crazy right field and all that stuff. But the biggest attribute, the thing you notice the most, is the big green monster, the green monster. So I agree with you. That is iconic Boston. If you think of Boston, at least as an American, because we appreciate and like baseball, the green monster is one of the first things that epitomizes Boston, Massachusetts.
Absolutely. I remember in EA Sports MLB Baseball 2005.
Oh, anytime you play, still to this day, anytime I play a video game that's MLB, we're playing at Fenway Park.
Right. Can you imagine just the attempt to hit over the big green monster every time, whether your buddy's pitching, whether a computer's pitching? It's a whole lot of fun. Either way.
So we both gave our number 3s. They were almost the same thing. What's your number 2?
So listen, I can't do it, but I'm going to try. My number 2 is going to be the Boston accent. If you park your car in the car park.
I think that's
about it. And you lose your keys and your khakis.
You had it at first. You had me in the first half, I'm not going to lie.
So
that
I'm going to go with the Boston accent.
Is the only Boston accent either of us will do.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to go any further than the shit I just spouted.
but Boston accent has got to be the number 2 thing from Boston, because I would argue that almost anybody in the entire world could almost guess that a Boston accent is from Boston. It's so distinct. It's so clear.
I'll agree with you. It's distinct. It's very clear. You know exactly what it's from. But I think it's like one of the most unpleasant, and that's pretty universal. It's an unpleasant accent. Nobody likes hearing those motherfuckers talk.
I got to agree with that. Maybe not my number 2. It is my number 2. I'm locking it in. Maybe it should have been my number 5. But
didn't mean to shit on your pick. So that was your number 2?
My number 2 is the accent of Boston.
My number 2 is
Pakyaka.
My number 2 is one of the most influential events that happened in American history. This changed the course of American history. This helped solidify our identity as rebels against tyrants. The Boston Tea Party is the theoretical start and symbolizes the start of the American Revolution, and it showed the ground cause of the war was no taxation without representation. We want to be able to govern ourselves. We're not paying these high taxes on your motherfucking tea. We're dumping it in the harbor. Fuck your tea, England. That's my number 2.
I really like that number 2 to the point where it's related to my number 1. While I wholeheartedly agree with the premise of what you said, I think we have, as a country, gotten far away from that.
I agree, but that's why we need a little Boston Tea Party.
Right? Kind of a new age.
Modern day.
A new age Boston Tea Party.
We're going to dump these vape pens out.
Right. We don't use the...
We're going to push all these Chinese toys into the ocean, but in San Francisco.
Right. Maybe even push San Francisco into the ocean.
Yeah, that might solve a lot of problems, honestly.
So, listen, I really like the Boston Tea Party. You know, they went against the monarchy there. You know, they helped solidify our independence, which, you know, while the U.S. has flaws, I have to say, I wouldn't prefer to live anywhere else.
Agreed. So that was my number 2, the Boston Tea Party. What? I think you kind of hinted at it. I think it's related to my number 2. What's your number 1?
So my number 1, Boston's widely known as the birthplace of the American Revolution.
It epitomizes like colonial America, the 13 colonies.
So, you know, it was one of the first founded colonies. You know, Paul Revere famously in Boston said the British are coming. It's always held ground for the American people. I think the birthplace of the American Revolution, the number 1 thing of Boston, people, places, things, Bostonites, I think the number 1 thing of Boston is its historical significance, being that it is where America started its independence.
I 100% agree with you. That really is why Boston is still, I think, considered like a major city, is because of that historical independence. And obviously they built off of that, but the foundation is that historical independence. So I love your number 1 pick.
What you got for your number 1?
So my number 1 pick, I know we both have had some like really heavy,
kind of serious,
like historical, like meaningful
melodrama type picks
for Boston. I'm going to go a little bit in the opposite direction. My number 1 pick is one of my favorite comedians, 100% my favorite podcaster. My number 1 pick is the great and powerful Joe Rogan.
Oh, I thought you were saying me.
Owner of the mothership, resident of Austin, Texas now, but he's a Bostonite at heart. That's where he's
born and raised. That's where he cut his teeth in the comedy scene.
Was not born and raised, but that's where he cut his teeth in the comedy scene. But he's a Boston guy. I think he's one of many Boston comedians, but he's the one that, even besides comedy, he's branched out, and his podcast has triumphed any other accomplishment he had, and he is by far the best podcast of all time.
I wholeheartedly agree. I wish I would have even thought about Joe Rogan. I didn't try to add a bunch of people to my list I wanted to add.
I was all over the place, so I see why you wouldn't have people.
But I get where Joe Rogan plays a part. He has, in the past 5 years alone, he has changed, American civilization.
Not just even American, honestly,
the world,
at least in terms of dialogue and
free
information.
speech. The fact that a company can back you to say whatever you want to say because they trust that you're not going to say the wrong thing.
Well, they also
you're not
trust you're going to bring in millions and millions of dollars in revenue.
Right. That's a part of it. But Joe wouldn't have done it had he not had the freedom control to do what he could do. Joe being the biggest podcast in the world is an understatement. Honestly, this guy should run for president one day. I would be proud to see Joe Rogan be the leader of the country at some point. He would not disappoint. His ideals are solid. His foundations are firm. Joe Rogan is a perfect number one pick for a Boston draft.
Let's move on to the news. What you got, Alex?
So listen, I am 100% happy to report that Derek Lewis's free agency has come to an end.
Short-lived free agency, and I love it too.
The former title challenger inked an 8-fight deal with the UFC. Dana White mentioned this in a power slap because he's pretty much asked about UFC fighters in every interview he's doing just because people want to know. He mentioned it in a power slap interview that Derek Lewis inked a 8-fight deal for the UFC, so he will not be going to the PFL. He will not be fighting Francis Ngannou as of now. He will not be boxing. He will continue to be the Black Beast. So get ready to hear about his next fight. We have to assume with a 33-second knockout against Rogério de Lima that he'll be fighting soon. I have to imagine, but by October, November, December, right?
I think so too, and I'm happy to have Derek Lewis back in the UFC. I think it's a good business by both sides.
I think it's a smart plan by Dana White's camp to try to strengthen the heavyweight division. It's historical with the heavyweight division to not have a lot of competition, with having older fighters just, naturally being leaning towards the heavyweight division. But this is a time where you can really amp it up. You can give John Jones some competition. There's fighters in the ring at the heavyweight division that can compete. So it's time to give them a chance.
All right, so the next piece of news we're going to move to is for UFC 293. We've been waiting for this announcement. UFC 293's official main event in Australia. Israel, the last style bender Adesanya, will defend his belt against Sean Strickland. This is probably not the best matchup, like if you could pick any matchup for Israel to do next, but he needed a fight on relatively short notice, about 5-6 weeks. Sean Strickland's a top 5 guy. Do I think this will be a great fight in a close fight? No, probably not. I think Israel kind of dog walks him, but happy Israel got a fight. I'm happy he's going to be on the Australia card. It's always good to have one of the top oceanic, like Australia and New Zealand fighters fighting in that region when they have a card there, especially since Volk is not fighting. So I'm happy about it.
Yeah, I like Sean Strickland. Honestly, I think I'm more excited about the promos, the pre-fight banter than I am about the fight at this point. I want some trash talk. Sean Strickland's famous for that. Adesanya is willing to say whatever. It's exciting. All right, so to jump back into our roster watch, obviously we just finished up the news with saying Derek Lewis is back on the UFC card. So that's probably the best way to just kind of headline the roster watch. Moving directly on from there, since we talked about him enough, a couple dropped people from the card that we don't have to worry about focusing on at the moment. Charles Boston Strong Rosa. He was 14-8 in his professional career as of now. He's faced some adversity in the UFC. He's going to have to, fight back in his regional circuit to get another opportunity to fight in the UFC. Most of the time they get there from Contender Series or off of a late notice card. So we look to see Charles Rosa back there in the future. 14-8, almost, doubled up his wins. And then the last drop of the night is going to be Mandy Boom. She's 8-2-1 in the UFC. Kind of rough start to her career in the UFC. Lost a couple by decision, won a couple by decision. Not really what the UFC wanted to move forward with. They want electric fighters. They want highlight fighters. In their opinion, honestly, I think if you're going for decisions as your main, kind of tout for victory, I think they're just going to let you continue to fight in your regional circuit. So I think that's going to pretty much cover it up for this week's roster watch. Close it up pretty quickly. Not too much happening. It's all going to really kind of show up after UFC 292. Really show who gets their new contract, who gets dropped, who has a good performance, who has a bad, who's got a ride home to mom, if you will.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Split Decision. Join us next week when we recap UFC 292. And then we'll gear up for UFC Fight Night, Holloway versus Korean Zombie. Thanks for listening. Check us out at splitdecision.com. Like and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Okay, bye.